Whenever you try to know about the American Civil War, you end up confused. But not today. The story begins when Abraham Lincoln's journey from his humble beginnings to his ascent to power is completed. Despite his modest upbringing, Lincoln defied the odds, carving out a successful career as a lawyer and politician that ultimately led to his presidency. Yet, the tensions between the northern and southern states, intensified by issues such as slavery and states' rights, reached a critical moment, sparking the onset of the Civil War. The conflict began with the Battle of Fort Sumter, followed by Bull Run and Shiloh. Nevertheless, despite setbacks, Lincoln remained tenacious in preserving the Union. However, before we explain what happened, you have to know what parties were involved in the war. The two major parties were the Union and the Confederacy. The Union, led by President Abraham Lincoln, consisted of the northern states united in their mission to preserve the United States as a unified nation. Their primary goal was to terminate the secession of southern states and maintain the federal government's authority over the entire country. President Lincoln also made it a top priority to end slavery as the war progressed, issuing the Emancipation Proclamation and ultimately rallying support for the passage of the 13th Amendment. However, he was facing President Jefferson Davis, who led the Confederacy, which was composed of southern states that had broken away from the Union. Their aim was to establish an independent nation separate from the United States, with a particular emphasis on protecting states' rights, including the right to own slaves. Additionally, the Confederacy desired recognition as a sovereign nation, especially from European powers. Apart from these two parties, border states like Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, and Missouri held strategic significance because of their location between the Union and the Confederacy. These states grappled with internal divisions and played pivotal roles as battlegrounds, struggling with the decision of whether to support the Union or the Confederacy. As the Union grappled to establish control in the East, the conflict persisted on multiple fronts. The Confederates wanted to invade Kentucky, aiming to secure the state's allegiance, but their advances were thwarted. In the Indian Territory, Native American tribes aligned themselves with either side, anticipating improved rights after the war. Along the Mississippi River, General Ulysses S. Grant, accompanied by General Sherman, emerged as one of the few Union leaders achieving significant victories. Leading their troops down the river, they targeted the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg. The strategic importance of Vicksburg was apparent to both sides. Capturing it would split the Confederacy in two, prompting intense preparations for its defense. Meanwhile, on the eastern side, President Lincoln searched for a capable commander to lead a march southward and capture Richmond. After dismissing General McClellan, Lincoln considered two candidates. The first, General Hooker, despite being eccentric, possessed military prowess. The second option was General Burnside, known for his distinctive name and impressive sideburns. Without hesitation, Burnside was entrusted with leading the Army of the Potomac southward, specifically for the Battle of Fredericksburg. Lincoln placed his hopes on Burnside to be the effective leader required for success. The initial plan was to swiftly cross the river and seize the city, but logistical delays hindered progress, resulting in a prolonged deadlock across from General Lee's Confederate forces. Amidst exchanges of offenses, the Union forces, numbering over 100,000, launched a massive assault on December 11th. However, the Confederates had fortified their defenses by then. In the harsh Battle of Fredericksburg, Union soldiers bravely faced a relentless Confederate onslaught. Even Confederate troops were surprised by the intensity of the fighting, with reports of a moment of compassion as a Confederate sergeant tended to wounded Union soldiers, leading to a brief ceasefire. Nevertheless, Burnside and his forces suffered a decisive defeat, necessitating a retreat. As the winter of 1862 approached, Lincoln's popularity and Northern morale continued to decline, intensifying the challenges faced by the Union. The scenes were devastating. The winter camps were rampant with disease, and the food left much to be desired. On both sides, soldiers began to leave, sparking questions of loyalty. Lincoln, known for his compassion, dedicated a significant amount of time to pardoning deserters facing death sentences. To maintain troop numbers, both sides had implemented conscription. However, There was controversy in the North since affluent individuals could simply pay substitutes to fight in their place. Riots erupted in New York City, with enraged mobs protesting the idea of fighting for slaves, a concept many of them vehemently opposed. Nonetheless, under mounting pressure, the Union finally allowed black men to enlist, and these courageous individuals, understanding their cause, eagerly enlisted. By the war's end, nearly 200,000 troops, comprising 10% of the Union Army, would be black. Their bravery and heroism silenced critics. Now, it was time to use General Joseph Hooker, who was tasked with leading the Army of the Potomac and participating in the Battle of Chancellorsville. Once again, Lincoln directed him to march south and seize Richmond. Hooker faced General Lee at the Battle of Chancellorsville, where Hooker's forces outnumbered Lee's. However, Lee, in a bold move, split his smaller force in two, ultimately achieving victory. It was a brilliant strategy by Lee. Nevertheless, Lee suffered a significant blow during the battle when his right-hand man, Stonewall Jackson, was mistakenly shot by nervous Confederate troops while returning to their lines at night. As for Lincoln, he found it astonishing. It marked yet another setback, further undermining Northern support, while the Union continued to face challenges in the East. Out west, General Ulysses Grant remained as active as ever in leading the Union Army. In an attempt to seize control of Vicksburg on the Mississippi, he executed a series of daring maneuvers. He deployed a cavalry raid and misled Sherman into heading north to confuse the enemy. With the help of a fleet of ironclads on the river, Grant swiftly moved his army south to cross the Mississippi. Recognizing the limitations of the terrain to the north, he strategically maneuvered northeast, cutting off Vicksburg's supply line and safeguarding his rear from Confederate forces in Jackson. Upon reaching Vicksburg, the Confederate resistance hardened, forcing Grant to endure a month-long siege, during which he found himself somewhat bored. Despite failing to capture the city, Lincoln remained hopeful and encouraged Grant to stand firm. It was only a matter of time before Mississippi came under Union control. Around this time, the Loyalists in the western region of Virginia, West Virginia, who had remained faithful to the Union, finally seceded to form their own state and joined the Union. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Lincoln once again found himself in need of a new general to lead the charge. And so, General George Meade was called to head up the Army of the Potomac, marking a pivotal moment for the Union because, once again, the Confederates had opted to go on the offensive. Despite the Confederates enjoying military success, their economy was taking a hit as the war dragged on. Riots erupted in the streets of Richmond as the cost of bread skyrocketed and supplies dwindled. Jefferson Davis toyed with the idea of dispatching troops west to aid Vicksburg, but General Lee knew that prolonging the conflict only made matters worse. He still clung to hope that by threatening D.C., the already demoralized North might surrender. Thus, in June 1863, with momentum on his side, General Lee once more ventured into the north, crossing Maryland and reaching Pennsylvania. General Meade rallied his forces to confront him, leading to what would become the most pivotal battle of the entire war. If the Confederates emerged victorious, D.C. could be in jeopardy. However, if the Union prevailed, it would be a game-changer, as the Confederates would lose steam. The unsuspecting small town that became the epicenter of the largest battle in American history was Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. On June 1st, skirmishes erupted between units from both armies, prompting the locals to seek shelter. By the second day, over 100,000 men sprawled across the battlefield. Lee seized the initiative, aiming to strike the enemy's sides. He nearly broke through the Union's disorganized left, but Union Colonel Joshua Chamberlain ordered a daring bayonet charge, crashing into the Confederates and pushing them back. The Union forces held their ground. On the final day, Lee believed the Union had strengthened its sides, so he launched one massive central assault to try and finish them off. The Confederates surged toward the Union lines during General Pickett's charge, only to face an unyielding onslaught from the Union forces this time. Meade accurately predicted Lee's strategy, resulting in severe losses for the Confederates, who were forced to retreat. Devastated, General Lee took responsibility for the situation, addressing his fleeing and wounded men. Despite anticipating a counterattack that never came, he ordered a retreat back into Virginia. This victory was crucially important for the North. Additionally, after enduring a month-long siege, Vicksburg fell, granting the North control over the Mississippi, coincidentally on the 4th of July. With this control, Union forces moved into Arkansas and Tennessee. Tennessee saw intense fighting, with Union General Rosecrans successfully driving Braxton Bragg's Army of the Tennessee out of the state. However, Rosecrans faced a setback at the bloody Battle of Chickamauga, leading to a Confederate siege at Chattanooga. During this siege, a temporary truce was declared to aid wounded soldiers. These truces, common during the Civil War, often saw soldiers trading items like tobacco and coffee from both sides. Fortunately, General Grant, now in charge of all Western Union armies, arrived and decisively defeated Braxton Bragg, who was leading the Confederate Army, pushing him back into Georgia. Teaming up with Sherman and Hooker, Grant confronted Confederate positions in the mountains around Chattanooga. Grant remained Lincoln's preferred choice for command. With these victories, Lincoln hoped the war's momentum was finally shifting. However, they were incurring losses in the form of human lives. In Gettysburg, the entire town converted into a hospital to care for the numerous wounded soldiers. A new national cemetery was designated at Gettysburg, drawing Lincoln to the opening ceremony. The main speaker droned on for 2 hours before Lincoln took the stage to deliver a brief yet profound address. In just 2 minutes, he eloquently expressed America's national purpose and the imperative to persevere. The Gettysburg Address would be remembered as one of the most renowned speeches in American history. Despite some signs of progress, the North still struggled to secure a decisive victory in the East, posing a challenge for Lincoln as his presidency entered its 4th year. With the 1864 election approaching, the Confederates saw it as a potential opportunity to sway the outcome in their favor. Aware of the war weariness in the North, Robert E. Lee hoped to capitalize on discontent by prolonging the conflict and inflicting further defeats, possibly leading to Lincoln's removal and a more sympathetic administration. That's when Lincoln understood the urgency of securing a win. Recognizing Grant's abilities, Lincoln appointed him as General-in-Chief and tasked him with defeating Lee. Grant devised a new strategy aiming to apply pressure on all Confederate fronts. General Banks targeted Mobile, Alabama. General Sherman advanced towards Atlanta, and Grant led the Army of the Potomac through Virginia. The plan was set into motion in May 1864. Sherman steadily advanced toward Atlanta, facing the smaller Confederate force led by General Joseph E. Johnston. Adding to the challenge was Nathan Bedford Forrest, a skilled and ruthless cavalry general known for winning the humorous Confederate Statue Award, lurking nearby with the intention of disrupting Sherman's progress. Despite these obstacles, Sherman emerged victorious in a series of battles, compelling Johnston to retreat towards Atlanta. However, just outside the city, Sherman encountered strong resistance and was forced to initiate the siege. Meanwhile, the main action unfolded in Virginia's Eastern Theater. Lincoln eagerly anticipated Grant's leadership against the Confederacy's top general. Grant introduced a new strategy by moving southward. Despite Lee's continued tactical superiority and the infliction of significant losses, Grant acknowledged the Union's manpower advantage. Instead of withdrawing after setbacks, Grant persistently advanced, repeatedly outmaneuvering Lee. In under 6 weeks, 80,000 men were killed, wounded, or reported missing. Grant faced criticism in D.C. for his notable losses, especially during the Battle of the Wilderness, where casualties were so severe that Grant reportedly shed tears. Despite the criticism, Grant was able to replenish his forces, unlike Lee, who found himself steadily pushed back towards Richmond. As Grant approached Richmond, he suffered heavy casualties in a failed assault at Cold Harbor. Instead of directly assaulting Richmond, Grant aimed to cut off its supply lines by advancing towards Petersburg. However, similar to Sherman's situation in Atlanta, Grant found himself halted outside Petersburg, leading to another siege. 2 prolonged sieges were insufficient for Lincoln's re-election prospects. The North became increasingly dissatisfied with the casualties incurred under Grant's leadership. To exacerbate matters, Lee dispatched Jubal Early northward to threaten D.C., hoping to force Grant to divert troops from Richmond. Jubal Early's advance was stopped on the outskirts of the city, with President Lincoln even observing the confrontation. But who was planning to challenge Lincoln in the crucial 1864 election? Well, it was General George B. McClellan, who said that if he was elected, he would boldly and bravely bring an end to the war, unlike Lincoln. Many Democrats, including McClellan's running mate, pushed for an end to the conflict. So, there was a chance McClellan might have sought peace with the Confederates, just what they wanted. With the war deadlocked and Lincoln's popularity waning, it seemed McClellan might prevail, giving the Confederacy a glimmer of hope for survival. Lincoln himself admitted that without a significant victory, his chances for re-election looked grim. Luckily, a victory was on the horizon. Atlanta had withstood General Sherman's siege for over a month. After numerous clashes, Sherman dispatched a unit south to cut the city's supply line, forcing the Confederate general to retreat. Atlanta, a key Confederate stronghold, fell into Union hands. For many, this marked the inevitable downfall of the Confederacy and the impending end of the war. When the election results were announced, Lincoln secured a decisive victory in the Electoral College with overwhelming support from the troops, a touching gesture from their commander-in-chief. In January, Lincoln threw his weight behind ensuring the passage of the 13th Amendment through Congress. In a narrow yet monumental vote, the amendment was ratified, formally ending slavery nationwide. Watching from the galleries, black men and women knew their fight was far from over. Several months later, at his second inauguration, with victory in sight, Lincoln chose not to brag. Instead, he stressed the importance of reconciliation and healing the nation's wounds. To him, all Americans, whether from the North or South, were to be reunited as fellow citizens. However, among the crowd listening to Lincoln that day was a man with no interest in reconciliation. John Wilkes Booth, an actor and ardent Southern sympathizer residing in D.C., harbored deep animosity and bitterness towards Lincoln. As the war turned against the Confederacy, Booth, despondent and consumed by rage, plotted his revenge against the man he blamed. Despite facing further defeats, Jefferson Davis showed no signs of surrendering. The North grew increasingly frustrated with the unnecessary prolongation of the conflict. In Atlanta, General Sherman believed he had the means to weaken the Confederacy's willpower. He embraced a forward-thinking idea. An army's strength depended on the support of the civilian population. Targeting civilians could weaken the military. Sherman devised an unconventional plan. He pulled his 62,000 troops from their supply line and marched through the heartland of the Confederacy, living off the land and creating chaos as they went. Along the way, they destroyed railways, farms, and communication lines and liberated many slaves. The resulting devastation was estimated at $1.4 billion. Despite the harshness of the tactics, Sherman saw them as preferable to more losses on the battlefield. By December, Sherman had reached Savannah, Georgia, but his mission was not complete. He redirected his forces northward to retaliate against South Carolina, the first state to secede. As he approached, he neared General Lee's entrenched army at Petersburg. The siege of Petersburg lasted 292 days, during which 60,000 of Lee's soldiers deserted, and numerous Union attacks failed. However, when the breakthrough finally came on April 2nd, a Union offensive quickly dislodged the Confederates from their positions. While Lee narrowly escaped capture at Petersburg, aiming to regroup with General Johnson, Grant pursued him relentlessly. Richmond was evacuated, and Jefferson Davis fled. The retreating Confederates set fire to military structures, accidentally sparking a firestorm that Union troops rushed to contain upon their arrival. Days later, Abraham Lincoln surveyed the city's devastation. Grant intercepted Lee at Appomattox Courthouse, where the Confederate forces found themselves trapped. On April 9, 1865, Lee saw no reason to continue fighting. Grant and Lee met in the home of Wilmer McLean, a man who had sought refuge from the Civil War years earlier. Despite their long-standing animosity on the battlefield, Grant and Lee spoke with mutual respect. As Lee left, visibly moved, Grant quieted his men's celebration, recognizing the moment as one for reconciliation. Just over 2 weeks later, General Johnson surrendered to Sherman, marking the largest surrender of the conflict for 89,000 Confederate soldiers and indicating the war's end. However, not every Confederate state had surrendered, but the war was nearing its end. Throughout the North, church bells sounded, and jubilant celebrations erupted. In Washington, Lincoln addressed an elated crowd from the White House, covering various topics, including his support for black voting rights. Lincoln had steered the nation through its most trying times, visibly bearing the weight of the presidency. He had lost over 20 pounds during this, calling himself the most exhausted man on earth. During a carriage ride with Mary, Lincoln appeared eager to embrace the presidency during peacetime. Surprisingly upbeat, he shared with his wife that they had both endured much hardship between the war and the loss of their son. But now it was time for joy. On the fateful evening of April 14th, Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater with his wife and friends, thoroughly enjoying the comedy. Meanwhile, in a nearby tavern, John Wilkes Booth downed 2 glasses of brandy before stealthily entering the president's booth, waiting for a moment of laughter from the audience before firing his weapon. The president was struck in the back of the head, and Booth fled the scene. Lincoln was swiftly transported to a nearby boarding house, where doctors pronounced his injuries fatal. Surrounded by his grieving family, cabinet members, and son, Lincoln passed away at 7:22 the next morning. The nation was shocked by the first-ever assassination of a president. A grieving nation watched as a 12-day funeral procession conveyed Lincoln's body back to Springfield, Illinois. Union cavalry eventually located Booth in a barn in Virginia on April 26th, where he was fatally shot. Confederate President Jefferson Davis was also captured shortly thereafter. While imprisoned for 2 years, he was eventually released to promote reconciliation. As the last Confederate forces in Texas disbanded in May, the southern states came under Northern military control to quell any further rebellion, heralding the start of a challenging Reconstruction era. Despite over 3 million Americans serving in the conflict, the Union emerged victorious, and the true beneficiaries were those who would never again face enslavement. Congress passed additional amendments granting Black individuals citizenship and voting rights, signifying significant progress. However, as America entered the 20th century, it was clear that the struggle for equality was far from over. Arguably, the most pivotal result of the conflict was the end of slavery. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 liberated all slaves in Confederate territory, while the subsequent ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865 formally outlawed slavery across the nation, effectively erasing the institution from American society forever. Following the war, the nation embarked on Reconstruction, focusing on rebuilding the South, integrating newly freed slaves into society, and fostering national cohesion. However, Reconstruction faced significant hurdles, including resistance from white Southerners opposed to change, and the rise of groups like the Ku Klux Klan, which aimed to suppress the rights of African Americans. Do you think the American Civil War was inevitable? Or could it have been avoided if Abraham Lincoln had resolved the factors that led to the war? In the comments section below, share your thoughts on the events of the Civil War and who you think resolved the conflict in reality. If you want to watch more simplified videos on historic events, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We make videos in a simplified style on historical events that change the world so you understand them better. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.